Yeah, now we're...
Yeah, we just gotta let our recorder load real quick.
Oh, so while we're talking, before we get to talk, these are some books we've made, and we'll pass it around so you can kind of get a look at them. Buccaneering Through Hell and High Water is a pirate setting. This is a book we contributed to. This is the actual core book for Savage Worlds. It's a role-playing setting. And then this is a preview document of SWAT, Spells, Weapons, and Tactics. That is our upcoming comedy parody game that combines like the TV show Cops with Lord of the Rings. And so you can kind of get a flavor. Well, let's keep that one up here.
Okay.
And so you can get a flavor of, we'll pass these two this way.
Yeah.
And those two that way. You guys get kind of flavor of like what we do. And it's still loading, technology. Loading.
Okay, we have light.
Can you shave that thing too, or?
It's in stamina mode. There we go. So let's see.
Stamina mode. Oh, all right.
Testing, talking your mic.
1, 2, test.
Right.
Cool. We're good.
All right. We're recording.
So, when they invited us to speak up here at Black Hill State University, go Yellow Jackets, we were picturing like honorary degrees, shiny gowns, funny little hats with tassels, and we pulled in last night and we find out there's no honorary degrees for us, no shiny gowns, and we'd have to come up with our own funky caps with tassels.
So we did it. So we'll get prepared. So let's make the change. All right. I think we're ready.
So we're here. We got invited up to talk to you guys about geek culture, creative output, and entrepreneurship and how they intersect.
Yeah, so just give you a quick introduction. My name's Chris Fuchs. I am what I like to call a gaming evangelist. I love all things gaming. I'm a board gamer, I'm a role player. I play with Matchbox cars, a game called Gaslands, which is my new love. It's a vehicular combat, so post-apocalyptic game with Matchbox cars. So I've been playing a lot of that. I founded the Rocky Mountain Savages. Rocky Mountain Savages is one of the largest gaming groups in the western part of the United States.
We haven't found a larger one. It
No.
could be the biggest in the universe, because once you get out of like the United States, right, then you're like the world, and after the world, then like,
Yeah.
right, we will assume we are the largest role-playing
Sure.
club.
Yeah, why not?
Right, let's give ourselves a title.
Yeah,
Right.
we'll say we are the largest role-playing club. And recently, about, a year ago, we incorporated the Rocky Mountain Savages as a role-playing company. So we're going to be writing, obviously, more role-playing games. We're looking at trading card games, board games, things like that. So that is now, not only are we a gaming club, we are an actual LLC under the name Rocky Mountain Savages. Christopher and I run a podcast called Savage Cast. That's on iTunes. So if you're ever interested in learning more about Savage Worlds, we have about, 35 episodes up right now. Working on, getting some more up, but it's one of those things of finding the time, and especially now with all the new things we have going, it's going to take us a little bit longer to get this thing up and running. I am, in my day job, I'm a systems administrator for a company called Schlumberger. It is a gas and oil company. Don't know if anybody has heard of it. I don't know if Spearfish, if you have a lot of oil and gas folks up here. But Schlumberger is a multi-international company based out of France. And so I copy and paste during the day for a living. And I'm also, you'll hear on Savage Cast and people have seen on my Facebook on postings, I am actually known as, everybody can laugh, I'm the Savage Mommy. The reason I'm the Savage Mommy, I'll tell you a real quick story. One of the conventions we were at, right after I had started the Rocky Mountain Savages, there's a couple, Ron and Veronica Blessing, and Veronica was talking to me, and Veronica said, Chris, at the convention, you're kind of like everybody's mom. You go to all the tables, you make sure that all the game masters have what they need, you make sure players have dice, you make sure game masters have drinks and food, you're kind of like their mommy. And that got put onto Facebook, and I said, no, I don't really like that. I said, how about like the General Savage or Savage General? And at that point, about 10 people posted after that, said, nope, you're the Savage Mommy. I said, fine. You embrace those things. When you have a group of people give you a moniker, I just took it and I ran with it. And so that's why you see I sign on as Savage Mommy. I'm Savage Mommy on a lot of forums and things like that. It's just one of those things I decided, you know, I'm just going to take what people wanted and just run with it. So that's a little bit about me. So I'll pass it over to Chris.
So I'm Christopher Landauer. I'm a gaming engineer. In addition to helping out Fox write Buccaneer, I'm also the lead on SWAT, Spells, Weapons, and Tactics. I've got a management science and engineering degree from Stanford, and in my day job, I do securities fraud analyst and expert witness in the investment industry. My moniker is the Savage Bull, and we'll get to why that has been bestowed on me. More of like the taskmaster planning kind of guy, you know, break down walls.
Because you're a jerk.
Right, and also that's also true. So Fox came up with the creative title for our speak today. It's called Wizard Fighter Rogue, Building Community Through Role-Playing. So, yeah, we'll start there. The Wizard Fighter and Rogue, to give you guys a little history of like the what the game is, if you guys are unfamiliar. Tabletop role-playing games, think Dungeons and Dragons, that's kind of the biggest property.
That's the granddaddy of everything.
They are cooperative social gaming events where you sit around a table and play games with dice. You're with friends and strangers. The outcomes are uncertain at the beginning, and that's kind of determined as you go through. So it's narrative, but it is undetermined. You're a player. You take on the role of a character who can be much like you or very different. And use your imagination, the rules of the game, and the uncertainty of dice to adjudicate what happens in this kind of cooperative storytelling environment.
I tell people it's Cowboys and Indians or Let's Pretend with some rules on top of it.
Right, it works. Or like, you know, a good film analogy is that like you're the game master's the director, the players all have their own writers who really don't talk to each other, and you throw out the script and improvise anyways. And you try to, you know, keep it on track and hopefully produce something fun at the end. But, you know, best laid plans and all, you know, rarely go. So among those roles, wizards are kind of if you think in the games, like they're the big fantastical reiners in of like arcane energy, the big effects, big specials. And that has applications in publishing and in community building as well. Part of publishing, community building is the advertising, the attractiveness, you know, bending reality to your will, making things that don't exist. And then rogues. Explain what rogues are.
I would say rogues, sneaky, backhanded sometimes, pickpockets.
Behind the scenes
Folks. They don't want to be big and flashy and up there for everyone to see them. You know, publishers, I think can be kind of roguey. You know, the publisher is the person who is going to sit back, let the writers, directors do all the work, and then put it out there for everyone to see and take the glory.
Well, and also part of like the community building and in publishing, having your mind on the dollars and cents. You know, someone's got to keep track of the money. Certain problems are best avoided versus tackled head on. So that the rogue skills kind of come into community building and publishing on the back end, where it's you know you're of course we're getting a call. No, Texas.
Wow.
Right? I'm gonna turn this off.
Off. How about off? There's
Right. Party foul. So Fox has one rule at the gaming table. What's your rule at the gaming
my
table?
rule at the gaming table is no phones and electronics if they're not being used for gaming purposes.
Right. So party foul on my part.
Party foul, yeah. Did you see how quick I was? How quick I looked over there? Oh no way. Bad news.
Right. And and fighters are kind of these through brute force and will, they use clunky pieces of iron to break down barriers, but they also protect the more weaker members of the party. and in community building. And
Right, because that wizard's going to be the first to go down and die. So you
Right.
got to protect that wizard at all costs.
If you put all your points in jazz hands and magical effects, you're kind of weak.
That's right.
So someone's there needs to be like the meat shield, and those kind of skills also come into community building and publishing as well. Just the immense amount of work that it takes, the perseverance, and also just looking out for the other people who you're working with. I mean, the management skills are very prone to the fighter role on knowing the people you're working with, knowing what the industry looks like, and then looking out for their best interests and easing the path on them.
Yeah, it's that whole party mentality. Writing Buccaneer. Buccaneer started out as a series of 3 adventures that a friend of mine wrote for me because he's not a people person. He's not going to go to conventions. He's not going to run games for people. He likes to write. And so he wrote me 3 pirate adventures. We shopped it around to some publishers, and we had a publisher come back and say, you know what, I think you have enough for an entire setting. I'd never done it. He'd never done it. This was not something that we'd ever done. And he said, what do you think? Do you think you have enough for an entire setting? And we just thought for about 2 seconds, sure, yeah, we'll do it. Having no idea what we were getting ourselves into, brought Chris into it. And so you kind of think about that party mentality, because we did a lot of our writing and a lot of our work on this book collaboratively. We worked together. We would go to my buddy's house, we would go up into his office, and we would just sit around a table with 3 computers and just write. And sharing ideas and being able to work well with one another and work off of one another with what one person is thinking, well, hey, maybe we should take this portion of the book this way. And somebody else saying, well, no, let's take the portion, let's maybe take it this way. And so, to me, that correlates exactly with what you're doing sitting around a table when you're playing an RPG. You might have that one dominant personality, that one dominant person who that spotlight shines on them, and they don't mind that and they want that. But then you have to have those other people, normally 4, 5 other people, depending on how many people you're running a game for. You have to be able to give them their chance at the spotlight, and they have to take that chance at the spotlight. And it's kind of, to me, the same thing that we did and that we're still doing with SWAT, and we're going to be doing with another property that we're in the process of trying to license right now. So I really think that's where you can really take what that role-playing does around the table to correlate it to the writing process and that creative process.
And the RPG industry feels like a young industry, and we're kind of just now getting into the 2nd and 3rd generation. What we vision as the founders of modern day RPGs have just recently passed or getting up there in age, and but it actually has some really deep kind of connections to both academia and human pursuits. So the cultural traditions that role-playing kind of builds on. There's sharing of oral history. There's storytelling. There's theater. There's the concept of the epic or the hero's journey. Fiction and fantasy as a lens to kind of tackle other issues, whether they're social or political or personal. Improvisational comedy. The power of communal laughter. So kind of every discipline, I know you guys are probably thinking about, like, what do I want to do with my life? What kind of degrees do I want to get? What kind of jobs do I want to get? And the nice thing about the role-playing game as a hobby and as an industry is there's room for all of it in the industry. It really is not focused on any kind of one left brain, right brain, soft sciences, hard sciences, social sciences. It's really a communally approachable and then communally kind of built hobby.
You just said a bunch of things that went. I'm just an old gamer guy. Let's say I was in college a really, really long time ago.
Well, yeah. So Fox remembers this, but in the history of where the industry kind of came from. Around the 1800s, when Europe was all fractious and fighting each other, the Prussians developed kind of a military tool to teach officers battle tactics.
Kriegspiel.
And you've probably seen this like if you've ever seen Patton or the movies where you've got, the maps of Europe and everyone's got little sticks pushing around figures. It's a form of like visualization and of strategizing. And after countries beat each other up, and I think Prussia kicked the crap out of France. That kind of cultural meme of using the visual, the tactical to represent wargaming or to real war became wargaming because you make peace, but suddenly you've got the adrenaline, the thrill, those kind of things of war became a peacetime activity. And for you literature buffs, in 1881, Robert Louis Stevenson, you'll know him from Treasure Island. He basically is considered the first person to use little tiny figures of like little war men to play toy soldiers.
Yep,
And
lead figures.
he never actually codified his rules down that we know of, but there's this great literary history and kind of that. And that leads into a couple decades later, in 1913, H.G. Wells, from War of the Worlds, he actually published a book called Little Wars. And the full title of this book...
So did you write down the full title?
Okay, so this gives you a hint on kind of some of the issues in our industry. The full title is Little Wars, a game for boys from 12 years of age to 150, and for the more intelligent sort of girl who likes boys' games and books. And we've kind of had trouble attracting equal numbers of girls to the hobby ever since. Just attitudes like that.
I wonder why.
I wonder why, right? And leading off of that, go forward about a century. Gary Gygax, who's the founder of D&D, he started a game called Chainmail, which was a war game, 1971, and then by 1974, he wrote Dungeons and Dragons, which brings in the fantasy elements. It kind of unhooked the hobby from the constraints of historical accuracy and historical recreation. And when you bring in that fantasy element, you kind of open it up to your imagination, and that's kind of where the game really took off.
Three little books that were created in his basement, boxed up in his basement, sold for $10. They made 100 copies to start this whole real hobby of D&D. And sold all of those and just continued from there. They had the very first Gen Con. I don't know, has anybody ever been to Gen Con? Which is in Indianapolis. It actually stands for Geneva Convention because it was in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. I will say if you, as a gamer, it is a pilgrimage that is very well worth making. I've been multiple times, and it's an amazing thing to go to Indianapolis, and on Wednesday night, the convention starts on Thursday, on Wednesday night, 60,000 to 70,000 of your closest friends descend upon the city of Indianapolis for 4 days of gaming. And they call it the best 4 days in gaming. If you can handle heat and humidity, it's the best 4 days in gaming.
Sometimes people who don't have, the best hygiene practices.
So I mean, Gary Gygax, that was the grandfather of them all. I actually met him a couple years before he died at Gen Con. Waited in a line to walk up to him and say hello and keep on walking.
He was famous for playing his game. He wanted the game master, and you could really only kind of play like 5, 6, 7 players at a table well, right? But he was so famous at the point where everyone wanted to play with Gary. So he would run these famous games where you'd come and sit at the table, you'd say hello, he'd roll, and he'd just basically kill your character. And congratulations, you've been killed by Gary Gygax, and you'd stand up and they'd bring another player, and he'd go around the table, basically just killing everybody off. So it was, you get a little pin saying, I got killed by Gary Gygax.
Yeah.
But to put it in perspective, like everyone thinks of Hollywood. Hollywood's kind of like the biggest industry for intellectual property and creativity and the outlets, and that's probably between like a $35 billion industry. And in today's world, and you guys might appreciate this, but to me, this is a profound thing. In the last 30 years, the video game industry has overtaken Hollywood as the biggest producer of entertainment content. Either as big or double of what Hollywood is currently doing. And the interesting thing there is, you could probably name, if I asked you guys, name 15 actors or 15 actresses or 15 directors, you could probably spit out those, we can come up with a list. But if I said, could you name 15 game designers? Probably a little bit harder, right? Sid Meier's Civilization, that's, he puts his name on the front, but Yeah, other than that, they're not exactly the big time
You can
celebrities.
barely name 15 games, let alone 15 game designers.
And,
Shane Hensley.
Right, Shane Hensley, that's all we need. So Shane Hensley's the guy who wrote Savage Worlds. We're kind of Savage Worlds aficionados. Just like D&D kind of liberated wargaming from historical constraints by injecting fantasy, what Savage Worlds does is say you don't have to just play fantasy tropes. You can play any trope. You can play Indiana Jones pulp. You can play, Cthulhu-esque horror. You can play, detective stories or superhero stories.
I ran a Scooby-Doo adventure where the players were the Scooby Gang. I ran an adventure with militaristic apes from similar to Planet of the Apes, where the people had to go, their main mission was to go, and a lot of you may look at me and go, I have no idea what you're talking about. Hopefully, Ryan, you might know. Their main goal was to save Orville Redenbacher, the popcorn magnate, because he managed to find a strain of popcorn and a strain of corn that was not irradiated, and the Russians wanted it. And so they had to go. I ran a Monster Island, which was military going on. I blatantly ripped off King Kong. And that's a good thing about role-playing games too, and things like that is you don't have to reinvent the wheel when you're trying to come up with systems and games and things that you want to run and play. You liberally borrow. That's what we say. You borrow plots and characters and things like that.
And that's where the rogue element comes in. I mean, in running games, like steal the good ideas, get rid of the bad ideas. No one has time to reinvent the wheel, and in a sense, like the rogue class, you have to go with the flow. Like none of us is bigger than the industry. None of us is bigger than the cultural times in which we live. A lot of things are foisted upon us. We don't have a choice, but we have a choice on how to react. And in using like strategy on that, kind of, it's how we help build community. We come up with some strategies on how do we effectively bring people together at the table? How do we ensure that their interests are protected, their rights are protected? How do we ensure they have a good time? And same thing with in actually bringing things to market. There's a lot of things we can't choose, but take advantage of them while they're there.
So let's talk a little bit about, I think, Chris, and maybe for you, how we, as the RMS, built the community that we have in Colorado.
Cool.
And things that we've done. So the RMS, Rocky Mountain Savages, came out of my desire to see more Savage Worlds, because I fell in love as soon as I saw it and heard about it. I went to a convention. There were 2 Savage Worlds games at this convention. And I am one of those people, probably like some other people in this room, that I have new shiny syndrome. And I get hooked on something, and I want more and more and more of it. And I got hooked on Savage Worlds, and I wasn't getting my Savage Worlds fixed. So I said, what can I do? What can I do to make this happen? And I went and talked to a couple people who were there, who were running the 2 whole Savage Worlds games, and said, what can we do to make this more of a game that's played? Because at that time, D&D was it. D&D was the end-all, be-all of the convention scene when I started going to conventions. You had some independent games, you had some games, GURPS, you had Hero System, you had some games like that were getting played, but if I had to put a number on it just as a rough guess, I would say 95% of what was being played at the conventions was D&D. And if you weren't a fantasy role player, there wasn't a lot there for you. And so I met with a gentleman named Neil Hyde, and Neil worked for a company called 12 to Midnight, which had produced some Savage Worlds product, and he's in Colorado, and we just sat down and we started brainstorming. And to be honest with you, to tell you exactly what happened next is kind of a blur to me, because all of a sudden, the next convention, there were 20 or 30 games, and a lot more people there to run games. Got to the point where we were having meetings at restaurants to plan our strategy for how many games we were going to run. And it kept growing and growing. Chris came on, he came and played in, was it one of my games?
Yeah, I was a player from the beginning. I was there from the very first. And
Kind of got roped in, and I've kept the claws firmly entrenched because without Christopher, a lot of what I do wouldn't get done and wouldn't happen. But anyway, so we got to the point where a couple years ago, we ran what we called a Savage 100. We had 100 tables at a 3-day convention of Savage Worlds games running. And I think we ran 97.
And we had 100, I think it was 108 games and then 103 actually ran.
Actually went. So we went from 2 games to 103 games running at a convention. And we just kept, working with our people, working with our GMs, working with our players. We hand out D6s. Some of you guys who were here last night got one of our Rocky Mountain Savages D6s. I have those. So anybody who didn't get one, make sure that you come talk to me and we'll get you one of those. And people were coming to play our games because we handed out dice and they wanted those dice. And so we built that player base by having something there, having good games, having games being played, having game masters who wanted to run various types of games. And that just kept growing. We have had 4 or 5 people move to Colorado after coming to one of our conventions and just falling in love with our community and the community of gamers and what we do in Colorado. And had one move away, and he even moved back to Colorado and is part of the gaming scene. So we built a community that people wanted to move from the East Coast or the West Coast and come to Colorado for some odd reason where it's entirely too expensive to live. And we built a community that way. We are
There's the side benefits too. I mean, like it's taken us on the road. We've gone all over the country, going to conventions. Fox has even gone international. At one of our conventions 2 years ago, we had an international writer for Savage Worlds come, Gilbert Gallo from Italy, and Fox went back just a month ago,
Yeah,
really.
2 weeks ago. I spent 2 weeks in Italy and spent a week with Gilbert and his family, and and never would have gotten the chance to do that had I not met him through this community. Shane Hensley, who is the owner of Pinnacle Entertainment, who writes Savage Worlds, is now a dear friend of mine. And I was basically instrumental in bringing him to the first convention in Colorado that he came to, and he keeps coming back. And so we're now in the process of working with him on licensing a new product to bring to Savage Worlds. We can't say a lot about it. We can say that it is a product that's based off a comic book that just got a deal on HBO, and they are currently
Next Game of Thrones.
working on getting it to filmed and on HBO. And we're working on trying to get that to turn into a role-playing game. So we've done a lot of
about to go on a big cruise.
a lot
too.
of hard work. Yeah, if anyone's interested,
Right.
there's still room. End of January, we're taking a 7-day cruise. It is Savage Cruise 2020 Caribbean Expedition. And Christopher and I and our friend Steve, we put that together. Another way to build that community and another way to get people who we might never meet, might not get to play games with. We've got people from, Gilbert's coming from Italy to go on the cruise. We've got somebody coming from England. All over the world that are coming to go on this cruise that we put together. That I talked to a friend of mine and he said, good luck, you're not gonna get 15 people to go on this. Gamers don't wanna go on a cruise, gamers don't have any money. Last time I saw him, I said, guess what, Brett? We have 100+ people coming on the cruise with us. He's like, oh, I can't believe that. But it's that community. It's that Christopher and I put ourselves out there and people know in the Denver area and in this community that we are somebody who's going to do what we say. We're going to make things happen. We're going to do our best. And if we can't make things happen, we're going to, do our best to try to make sure that we can remedy things that we can't make happen. But it's that whole really big community that we've built all around this little game.
Yeah, and I think whether you're a far leftist community activist, social justice champion, or you're a far right capitalist, want to create a fortune. Building your community, it's the same. It's the same skills on both sides. It's, your fellow protesters and your customers are attracted to you and galvanized with the same kind of tool sets. Some of the things that we've done, we'll just give you a little rundown of kind of just some pointers that we think has been effective in learning the hard way. You can pick up like a salesman book. You can pick up a Dale Carnegie book and learn about attention, interest, desire, conviction, and close. Kind of the classic salesmanship things, and those are very true. I mean, the attention part of the game is kind of where Fox lit the spark. You light the spark. You got to have some reason people want to join you, whether it's noticing something in the zeitgeist or something you want to get out there. You got to start somewhere.
Or you're selfish and you want to play more games.
Right?
That's a lot of where it came from.
Exactly. And so, but you need you can't build a fire unless you get the spark out first, right? And then advertising early. This is the thing. Getting the word out takes a long time. It's very hard to get heard over the noise, the signal. So starting early with like the cruise. Like we decided we're going to do a cruise. We're going to do it in a year from now. And so we have 1 year, let's go now. And it's a big question, like, are we gonna get people to show up? It's like throwing a birthday party and you're worried if your classmates are gonna show, right? Like, I'm gonna be the only kid at my birthday party. But if you give people, if you can't make up for money, make it up for an effort and time. Put in the effort and take the time, and that's anything, anybody can do that. So start early. Building your contact list. If you want to build a tribe, you got to know who these people are. You got to have a way to reach out and touch them. So email or
With consent.
Right, with consent. Yes. Don't touch anybody.
Jeez,
in that
Christopher.
round.
Wow.
Like, metaphorically reach out and touch people, not whatever. Yes, that's another problem in the industry. So everybody's got that problem. Building your brand. I mean, the brand is who are you, and deciding early whether it's naming your club and getting a logo and getting business cards. The brand is kind of something that people can recognize. It's a touchstone. It's an important part of any kind of movement. Any kind of, if you think about like logos, whether it's a fist on the activist side or a swoosh on the Nike side, it's something that codifies a community. The same reason that you guys have the yellow jackets, and that trying to keep people around either a message or a central image is kind of an important part of building community and maintaining the consistency, because at some point the teachers in your school will move on, the principal will move on, but the institution will remain, and so the institution itself kind of becomes a brand. And in that way, like, one day Fox and I might die, because unless we're necromancers. But the club will live on because we've built enough momentum and enough structure to keep it moving on. Anything to add?
Nope.
No, we're good. Okay. Let's see. Be consistent. Consistency is something that anybody can do. You don't have to have talent to be consistent. You don't have to have money to be consistent. It is not only just having the habits, like the habits of successful people, but in how you approach people. Whether it's a month before every convention, we'll make sure we touch base with people. Consistency is kind of one of those key things that keeps the groups together. Let's see.
And I think something on that we've done is big social media. Having our own website, having our own forums, having a Twitter account, an Instagram account, a Facebook account. It's all stuff that everybody's doing anyway, but it's put it out there, put those messages out there. It's a good way to bring in new blood if you're looking for people to run games and things like that. And so we use those types of things to our advantage.
Right, it's a community platform. It's not only for you to send your message out, it's also to get feedback from people. That is the marketplace of ideas. And on those ideas, own your intellectual property. And this is really important for like the artist types. When you're just starting out and you want to get into an industry and you're developing your skills, it's really easy to think you have to give away stuff for free in order to get attention. But there's only a few great ideas and a few more good ones, and ownership of those ideas is important. And we have in our wonderful society, capitalist society, ways of claiming your intellectual property. And like your brand is one of those things, but protect yourself on that, because there are whole industries of people out there who abuse intellectual property. And if you put the time and the effort in, it's good to protect that. It's one thing that it comes later in the creative types when you're like, oh no, I just want people to like me, I just want people to interact with me, I just want to get this thing out there, and you give it away for free, and that was your one great idea, right? Owning it is a good thing, and protecting yourself with intellectual property, it's just a way of making sure that you are dealing with the community fairly, that's you get justice for what you create.
And that's, something that we're dealing with right now. Won't say a lot on it, but yeah, we're dealing with some intellectual property things right now that we're trying to navigate those. How do we deal with those? How much do we push? Do we need to spend the money to trademark some things that we've done? So, that's something that lessons get learned,
Right.
when you're trying to do this. And, we're still, we're a year into this issue and still trying to figure out and work our way through it. Because again, all about community, we don't want to do anything to hurt the community that we've built. And so that to us is something that we really have to spend some time thinking about. How do we protect that IP?
Well, it's the same thing on licensing. We both worked for a year and a half on a project that ultimately get up right up to the finish line, right before a big Kickstarter, right before production, and intellectual property issues kind of put a kibosh on it.
And 2 days before the Kickstarter launch, we had to pull the entire project, and that was almost 2 years of work that we put in on this project of blood, sweat, and tears, and screaming at people and yelling at each other and not getting along because we're a tribe. And like I said earlier, when you're writing and you've got 6 people stuck in a cabin for 4 days and no one's allowed to leave, you gotta use those skills that you learn so you don't kill each other. But yeah, that was a big thing for us, and something that we're gonna really be able to learn from when we get ready to do our next project, because SWAT will definitely kickstart. In this market and the way things are right now, really, if we're gonna get a product out there and a product to market and something that we can put in people's hands, we're gonna have to kickstart it.
Well, here's a question. How many people in the room have ever played a role-playing game? At the table. Okay, good deal. See, and all the girls in the back, none of the hands are raised.
No.
We will bring you into the hobby. We will. We promise. How many people have either backed a Kickstarter? Ever backed a Kickstarter? A subset of the same group. So I'll describe what Kickstarter is. So Kickstarter is a community funding platform. Building off of this whole community idea, the largest segments that are on Kickstarter are tabletop games. So whether it's board games, role-playing games, it's by far the largest kind of segment on there. But everything that people do, home products, causes, movies, kind of you name it, creative toys.
Shoes. I have a pair of shoes at home that I kickstarted. Actually, kickstarted tennis shoes.
Right. There's some great films that have come out of Kickstarter. They kickstarted the Reading Rainbow, bringing Reading Rainbow back to TV, and they made like $12 million, something like that on that. So even educational programs use Kickstarter. But for us, Kickstarter is kind of an amazing kind of nexus point of community and gaming, because it's a way of kind of disrupting the traditional publishing model. In prior decades, publishing was, a very few publishing houses would be large. They dominate the market. They'd have the ins with, production overseas, or in Mexico, and getting books on the shelves. And that was kind of, very, only a few companies, and the role playing was just a small part of that a lot of people just self-published, and the books wouldn't really go anywhere. But now with Kickstarter, you kind of break that dominance of having to, in the old model, if you wanted to produce something, you'd write a manuscript or an idea for a manuscript and you'd shop it around. You'd have to get an agent and they'd have to go to these publishers, and everybody else would get paid before you would. You'd be the one who creates the product and the publishers get paid, your agent gets paid, the printers get paid, the bookstores get paid, and then like maybe if you got kind of like you give them your first book, and then you get a decent deal on the second book if you were that good, and then you might see some cash. And now with Kickstarter, basically it's you can produce enough of a viable product where you can convince people to pitch in, and you present it to them and you say, hey guys, if we make this much money on this project with pre-sales, and people come to the site and they'll say, I'll pledge to buy that product, and if you hit your funding goal, everyone gets charged for it and you get the cash, and it's your job to then produce the product and ship it out to people. And some of these, like any kind of investment, have failed, some of them have been scams, but on the whole, most of them have been incredibly successful in producing new and varied content. So the barriers to entry are lower than they've ever been. The kind of platform you can get if you do the work is more accessible than it ever really has been. And so like for Buccaneer, we went to Kickstarter and we figured we needed like $7,000 to print the book.
Our goal was $7,000 to fund what we wanted to do.
And then
ended up with $14,400.
Right.
So we doubled, and we funded our $7,000 in under 12 hours as a first-time Kickstarter. I'll tell you, having never done anything like this, and like I said, having never written anything like this before, and going, oh yeah, sure, we can write an entire setting to
well, started as a new adventure.
Fund in 12 hours was just amazing.
The whole thing started like I think the origin of Buccaneer was Fox and Brett wrote an adventure for an existing pirate property. So like Buccaneer is very much Pirates of the Caribbean, right? And there was an existing line from
Pirates of the Spanish Main.
Pirates of the Spanish Main, and but because of licensing, the Pinnacle is no longer going to be publishing Pirates of the Spanish Main product. So you had this great adventure you guys wrote up, and then like nowhere to publish it. So Shane's like, well, why don't you just turn it into a setting and kickstart it? And that's kind of started us on our publishing journey from there. And you've got like 500 people to back the book, and you go from, hey, there's like 4 of us, 4 game masters and maybe 20 players, and then we get like 50 game masters and hundreds of players, and then who's actually going to put money down and buy our book? And then it's these kind of snowball effect of the work, maintaining the brand, maintaining kind of the things you've built. It just kind of kept opening doors, step by step, on what for both of us is a side gig. It's not our main jobs, but the funny thing now is with the amazing economy we've got and the kind of the growing hobby. To put in perspective, I think like Hollywood and video games are in the like $20-30 billion range, and board games and role-playing games like 2-3 years ago were about 12 billion, and they've been growing at 10% ever since year over year, which is immense growth. I mean, if you look at like what the government will give you for a bond, it's under 1%, which means like the country's not even growing at that. You need to grow at like 2 or 3%, and that's amazing growth. And this industry is 10% year over year, which means that like if you don't play games, your kids certainly will. So
and anymore, I mean, you can barely bring a board game to market if you don't kickstart it. It is that prevalent and almost, I would say at this point, expected that if you have a game and you want to get it out there, you're gonna take it to Kickstarter. Or you're gonna take it to a lesser degree. There's another platform out there called Indiegogo. Indiegogo, I would say is the lesser of the two, the stepchild of crowdfunding. Not a lot happens on Indiegogo, but
there's some more artisan projects though. Like even companies like Lego. Lego wanted to test a new line of like higher end Legos, like as if they weren't expensive enough, right? They wanted to kind of bring in like artisan Legos, and so the thing they made was like a koi fish that has customizable skins on it, and you can build this gorgeous koi model, and it's actually mechanical to the point where like you can leave it on your desk and it'll swim. And so that line, they call it Forma. Instead of going to investors to get money to try these out, they put it on Indiegogo, was incredibly successful, and so they kind of launched a museum quality kind of like art house kind of funky new line for their business. So even bigger companies are looking at crowdfunding as a way to both advertise and generate revenue, and that kind of really opens the door for any of your creative hobbies, whether it's in publishing or community building or gaming. The fact that crowdfunding is here to stay and really going nowhere. It's kind of just a new kind of phase of capitalism where you don't have to be, we didn't have to go to a bank. We didn't have to go and say, here, I'm going to put my house on the line or give you my car or, have great credit or any of those things to build a project, which, if you look even at like social justice issues, access to money and funds to speculate has been a very large component in success of communities and success of minority communities, whether they're class minorities or social minorities or racial minorities. Access to capital is kind of one of the linchpins in how you get out of poverty, and the fact that there's crowdfunding now is the ultimate democratization of capital. If you can convince people of your idea, you can make it happen. So. And to put things in perspective, like our book, we started out small. The Savage Worlds itself recently kickstarted, and like 5,600 people backed it.
Yeah, and that's the new Adventures edition.
Like $600,000 at the end.
Yeah, $600,000 or $700,000
right.
is
and
what
then,
they ended up. And Pinnacle has never done, I think, under $60,000 or $70,000 for any of their Kickstarters. And they are amazing. And a little bit more about this. And Pinnacle, what a lot of people are doing these days is, and Pinnacle is doing this, is they're using Kickstarter as a barometer of, hey, is this book going to be profitable? Can we make this? Can we send this to the printer? Is it going to have enough oomph out there? And Pinnacle, a lot of times, with a lot of their stuff, they have it ready to go. They will have a PDF, and it will be ready to go. They didn't really, unfortunately, with Adventures Edition, but when they did what was called the Deluxe Edition, the one right before this, they kickstarted that. The day the Kickstarter ended, every backer had a PDF copy. They do a line called Deadlands. Deadlands is, easiest way to put it is the Wild West mashed with horror. It's my favorite setting. I love it. It's what I run. And they've done a lot of Deadlands settings. And all of those settings, they're ready to go. They're in PDF, and they're using Kickstarter to say, okay, can we do a print run? Do we have enough people who are interested to make this viable? And so they're using it marketing and to say, hey, can we do this? And it's working for them. But for us, when we did Buccaneer, we bought a lot of artwork up front. We spent a lot of money up front to get Kickstarter up and running, because you can't just put something up on Kickstarter, slapdash, and hope you're going to get backers. You need to have artwork. You need to have artwork that is going to be in your book. You need to have a sample chapter. You need to have these types of things. You need to know, what are you going to do once you meet that goal? You have stretch goals. Once you meet that goal, for every X amount of dollars, you offer stretch goals to people. So you have to know, what are my stretch goals going to be? So there's that upfront that you have to do on Kickstarter. And for little guys like us, hope it funds. And then go from there. And I will tell you, on our Buccaneer Kickstarter, we lost money. We are in the hole for our Kickstarter, because we doubled the size of the book, which doubled our printing costs. And lots of lessons learned. So if you ever decide to do a Kickstarter, get a Kickstarter manager. They're worth the money. And we did have a Kickstarter manager on Bureau 13 who was going to be there for us, unfortunately, with that being canceled. But that's kind of important. So Kickstarter is very important, and it is not, I won't even say the wave of the future anymore. It's the future. It's what people are doing to get these games out there.
And we came last night and ran we ran some SWAT for, the Geek Club, and some of you guys were here.
Who was here last night? Who played SWAT last
That
night?
was definitely there.
I was here, I wouldn't.
All right.
But one of the conversations that came up during the game was that how many fingers touch a product and how many different people contribute to a product. And even if you are not a gamer or, like for SWAT, we have a professional layout artist. So he's a guy from the industry who spends most of his time doing like print advertisements.
Yeah, he's art director for an advertising agency.
And he did the art direction for our book. The multiple artists creating everything from like either 3D art, 2D art, digital art, icons, custom fonts, all those kind of outlets for artists to get involved in the process. Editors, so anybody who's in that kind of field, whether it's reading for sensitivity or reading for grammar and pacing, and whether the crunch makes sense. All different types of editors kind of get their hands on that project, and then multiple authors because just the different ideas kind of coming together and congealing, and that's just even just the people you deal with like before you have anything to give anybody else. And then then it's dealing with other publishers, it's dealing with China, or sometimes domestic. But China's kind of the big place to go for book printing because it's so expensive that China currently has the best prices on paper and on like the printing technology. And so you have to deal with customs and trade and taxes and tariffs. And so recently there's a lot of news about trade wars between the United States and China and how that's affecting the industry. And certain games are just not viable if you add even the thinnest margin of a tariff on it. And so there's a lot of just skills from all over the kind of breadth from social sciences, math, accounting that kind of come into being, and being able to like deal with those people and communicate. Is a big part of it. So we got a couple. We already plowed down for a good 50 minutes.
Do I have to I want to turn it over to you guys. I want to answer some questions. If you guys have any questions or anything that you want more information on, or just anything that we haven't talked about that you want to know about, shoot them our way. Come on
Got no
now.
hand.
Come on now. Somebody. All right.
Yeah, in terms of playing this, sociologically, how immersive can a session get? Like, do you have sessions that can go for like 8 hours or 5 hours? And then in terms of the imaginative component that's compared with a probabilistic statistical component where you're rolling dice, how immersive, how present is it when you get in the game? How is it different, for example, from playing like a video game or reading a book or watching a movie? What's the experience like? What hooks you into this as opposed to other sorts of artworks that are imaginative?
I would say for me, it's sitting around with folks at a table. We talk about video games and playing and being friends with people on Xbox Live or PlayStation. To me, that's not being friends with someone. You're talking to them through a headset. You have no idea who they are. You have no idea who you're talking to. When I sit around a table and I'm running a game or I'm playing a game, for me, I think the whole core is it's actual people. I like to interact, and I like to, share ideas with other people, things like that. And I don't think, for me, you can't get that in a video game. Now, I will say that sometimes video games, I was addicted to Minecraft at one point, and one day spent 17 hours playing with a friend of mine, and we were online, and we just sat for 17 hours and played Minecraft. But that to me, if I could have been sitting next to him somewhere, that would have been much better for me to be able to interact, see him. And so for me, for being around a game table, nothing beats it.
And there's an interesting trend on that in the industry. If you think about it, most of you have probably interacted with a Dungeons and Dragons style game long before like World of Warcraft, a major property in gaming, 20-year plus franchise. Those kind of games, interestingly enough, like grew out of the hobby, but had much more mass appeal because they didn't require the upfront education of the mechanics of the dice rolling of that. They were just the game did it for you. But interesting enough, those games have a lot of math behind them. If you've ever played, like, I play a game called Borderlands, and Borderlands 3 just came out. It's a great shooter kind of game, right? It's a fun game where you run around with guns, and the guns are all crazy, and shoot fire, and, you know, electricity and snowflakes, and you name it, it's crazy, and you loot chests. And as the game rolled out, in the subsequent days after release, the creators of the game released these hot fixes, and the hot fixes are dialing in the numbers on all the mechanics of the game, and it drastically changes how the game plays. And so there is an immense amount of theory behind gaming and the numbers, but people feel the game. You know, even though it's highly mathematical and it's technical and you gotta get it right, at the end of the day you kind of remember, you don't remember, oh, I rolled a 13% chance and then a 6% chance of doing that much damage and then it was amazing. You remember, I jumped off the back of a stallion and took a spear and slammed the dragon in the eyeball and it died, it was amazing, and there was cheering. And so the visceral part of gaming is what you remember, but there is that kind of underlying crunch behind it. And I think because you are face to face with people, it's more polite. The kind of harassment and major negativity you get if you're on a video game and just hearing, sounds like 12-year-old boys the other end with really foul mouths. People don't do that face to face as much, nearly as much. And so the idea that you'd come in and almost all gaming tables are very welcoming places. And because there is that kind of intimacy and politeness that, sharing space with people. And that also makes it better. And when you do get immersive and you go into if you're playing at a friend's house, you can play a 6 or 7 or 8 hour session and you're sharing food and you're also just sharing, laughing and off topic jokes. You can get, very fun, very immersive. And then there are times where you're running like, a 2-hour convention game where you don't know people. And that can be a little more transactional. You're there to have a story, but you're not going to get super deep. But some games really do even lend themselves to that. And there are, as the hobby's maturing and more women are playing and less of the we need to recreate war games idea, you get more creative games. Like there are people who are creating games that are about childhood trauma and therapy. And maybe even those games might even be dangerous in some regards, where is this material that you'd be really willing to just foist on someone right away or not? But they're also developing kind of social tools to use with those games that help on consent and on how you tell those stories. And they're not necessarily as much about rolling dice, but more about cooperative storytelling.
Yeah,
so
those are small indie games. The game that Chris was talking about, written by Camden Wright, who was a Denver guy, who actually moved back to New York, and Camden, it's called One Child's Heart, is the game that he wrote. And it's a very small, couple pages, just an indie game. And what you had said, Chris, and Ryan, to kind of go back to that a little bit on why I like to get together with people. I play in multiple games. I run multiple games. I'm right now playing in 2 and running 1. So my Friday, Saturday, and Sunday every weekend is gaming. So I am the consummate gaming geek. That's what I do. That's what I love. And just this last Saturday, I'm playing a Star Wars game. And it is by a company called Fantasy Flight Games. And we have a Discord channel for my gaming group. And so we always get together, a week before the game, and we plan food. And this past week, what my friend Sarah called it a soup party. So 3 of us brought different soups. Somebody brought bread. We had somebody make grilled cheese, and we all sat down, played the game, took a break, had dinner together, hung out, talked about non-gaming stuff, went back downstairs to the basement. Yes, we do play in the basement.
It's cooler down there, don't you?
And just continue the gaming. So I'm not gonna get that from a video game. I'm gonna tell the guy on the other end, sorry, I'm logging out for an hour so I can go have dinner. I'll talk to you later. And I'm not gonna have that face to face where, I'm gaming, take a break, go have dinner, go back and game some more. And how can I put this without sounding horrible? Because I hated the game. D&D 4th edition. D&D has gone through 5 editions. It is currently on the 5th edition of the game. D&D 4th edition was a tabletop MMO. They tried to make a game that simulated World of Warcraft or those MMOs to try to get those people from out behind their computers, and it was a complete and utter failure. It lasted 2 or 3 years, I think, 4th edition, before it just completely folded and they put out 5th edition. And so, you know, they're even trying to get those people to come out from behind those screens and build that community and do that. And you'd ask about dice rolling and things like that, especially in Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds dice rolling is one of the funnest things about that game, just because of the way the dice mechanic works. You have all your stats and everything is based off a die type, and then you roll a d6. It's called a wild die. And just give you, so say I'm making a strength check and I have a d8 in strength. So I'm going to roll a d8 and a d6. If either one of those comes up to that max number, so I roll a 6 on my d6, I pick that dice up and I roll it again. If I get a 6, I roll it again. And when you see people sitting around the table and they're rolling for damage, and they just keep getting those 6s, and you just see that energy just keep going up and up and up as they keep rolling those dice and they keep exploding. And in Colorado, dice explode. Shane says that dice ace. He calls it acing because it's all about Deadlands. That was his first setting. Wild West, dice explode. And so that's, you get that and you get that feeling that.
Right, like last night we had, this gentleman over here was playing the wizard in the game I was running, and it was you double exploded. You rolled a 10 on the D10 and a 6 on the C6, and that was like the critical moment at the end of the game where there's a pole dancing Balrog, and this guy blasted him off the pole because the less than 1% chance. But when it comes up, yes, in the regards of like. Yeah, it's, no one's thinking, oh, it's statistically less than 0.076 whatever percent. No, it was an amazing, like, oh my God, both your dice exploded, do it, roll them again, add them up. And those are the kind of the moments you remember and the fun, engaging parts of the hobby. So,
yes.
Okay, so you guys are very book centric. So how do you deal with having to balance the game after release?
Good call. So the interesting thing is, so we'll use the current version of Savage Worlds as the example. It was an iterative kind of update, and between kickstarted amazing, and then released the PDF to everybody, and then spent a good 6 weeks getting feedback from the community on, is this rule is confusing, can you reword this? Oh, does this rule really work? And so it was this amazing kind of dialectic between creator and fans on commenting on the game, and before they sent it off to print. So that's kind of the new standard now, is that because there are easier digital platforms to communicate with people, you can give them your alpha copy or your beta copy of the product early as a PDF, and then say, hey guys, is this the game you want to play? And some people even.
And that's what they did with Adventures Edition.
Yeah.
They went through how many iterations before final print?
Yeah, well, we were on for a whole year before, so we had gotten to see certain parts of the new edition before, and we were actually bringing them to our tables and play testing, actually running the rules and then sending back feedback on it. And that's a really cool kind of creative thing that other industries don't have the luxury of, because you don't have to necessarily give someone the final book, right? But there's still this. Anybody ever seen Stranger Things? To show you guys. So Stranger Things has brought back this resurgence for old school D&D, because the kids are playing it in that series, right? And so the guy, Guy Gex is dead, but one of the guys who was on the original kind of red box D&D is taking advantage of the fact that it's cool again. They put out a new version of D&D to kind of match the show, and that the respect for the old school is also this. I want to have the book in my hands. There's nothing. It's kind of the same reason that e-readers for fiction are now a huge market, but there are still bookstores. There's been a change in that market. There aren't as many. There's been some consolidation, but it's great to have a book on your phone or a book on your tablet, but some people like the smell, the tactile part of it, and gamers especially, because we still use dice. Like one of the young ladies over there was using a digital dice roller last night, which is really fun, right? Like you actually have the dice in your phone, you don't have to carry around your bag, but some people just like having little bits of plastic to roll. And so to answer your question more specifically, that's this pre-process where you can give your fans the alpha and beta copies of your book digitally and let them continue the process of iterating. And then if there are major mistakes, you come out with errata, and then you just hope that, like, hey guys, you kind of paste at the back of the book.
And that's kind of what we had to do, actually, with Buccaneers. We just had to do a conversion document because Adventures Edition was not out.
Yeah, so that was written for
We
the
wrote
previous
that for
version.
Deluxe, so
And then-
that's based off Deluxe.
Whole new version comes out, and so we just released like a document that said, hey, if you want to keep playing this game, these are the changes you need to make to
Yeah,
your characters.
and it's just a free document, drive through RPG. We threw it up there, we threw it up on our website, and you can go to RPG now and get that. You can go there, get a copy of the PDF. The PDF is eventually gonna be updated. Like I said, we have a lot of things in the fire right now that we have to work on, so, more product and things like that, for Buccaneer will be coming out. But yeah, that's really the key to that, is get it in people's hands beforehand and let them be your editor, let them be your proofreader.
And on the digital front, there's some crazy trends in the industry. So one of the publishers just put up a Kickstarter, and they've successfully funded, and this is their concept. They don't want to support China, right? So there's issues with China right now politically, and China's kind of where you kind of need to go for printing. And they want to be more environmentally conscious. So they don't want to cut down trees to print books. So they are doing a strictly digital book. And obviously strictly digital in the same way that like software has a model where you spend a lot of money up front and then each individual copy doesn't cost you as much because it's just, it's digital. The book industry is kind of similar, but the problem is that people aren't really willing to pay you as much for a one copy of a digital as they would if they had the physical book. So this one with their kind of like buy into our virtue as much as our product, they're saying like, here, you can have the book for $10, but every dollar you pay us over 10, whatever, it's like you pay 15 or 20 or 100, this is where that extra money is gonna go to. So if you pay us $100, the artists are gonna get this much extra money for their work, and the design team is gonna get this much extra money, and the editor is gonna get this much extra money. And so it's literally saying, if you like our values and we're not gonna do these things, like work with these people or work with these materials, will you pony up the money for it? And, God bless them, there are
Right.
people who have bought into this
And then
as a model.
there's POD, which is print on demand. You can get our book at this point, print on demand, where you basically pay and they will print you a single copy. That single copy is printed off the latest PDF. So if there's errata and things like that we've put in, like one of our charts was a little off, so the chart in the PDF has been corrected. So anybody who does a print on demand, you do a PDO of our book, it's gonna be the most updated version. And a lot of companies are going that route as well because they're small. They can't afford that 1,000 book, 1,500 book print run that China requires. Ours was 500, 600 print run, and we did it domestically through Lightning Publishing, and it was really expensive to get that published. But so print on demand is a big thing right now as well. So, anyone else? Yes.
So you mentioned it earlier where you were saying, since the title of that book, you have had problems getting females to actually play the games, but it's starting to rise, that trend. But you can also see within the group, raise of hands, how many have played whatever. What trend do you see that's bringing more females into the fold, essentially?
I think the democratization of the content of the games is interesting. I think if you notice that the people who were even started it, coming out of the military, right? The military is a very gendered organization, right? Like vastly more men are in the military than women, and the idea of wanting to play war games is kind of a masculine focus there. having content that is more in line with the female audience, whether it's like, you know, the kind of type of literature they like, and they have games that are around those kind of literatures, whether it's period romance or, you know, like the True Blood novels, incredibly popular with that segment. There's a game for that, and so I think the creating content that simply appeals more to that audience has helped it. I think teaching people manners has helped. You know, if you have any kind of, whether it's intentional or not. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you.
If you have any kind of content that's, you know, earnestly biased towards one specific kind of group, you kind of get your own culture around it, and that seems exclusionary. I think by just having more women show up, more women authors, you know, having agency over publishing, and being able to get to the traditional publishing routes, that's helped. So I think that's kind of you know, the first step is if you want more people you know, of a diverse background, empower more diverse people to create the content for you, and you know, be able to do it. So I think that's kind of the next step in kind of building that. Because you know, if you think about it, there's nothing all that purely masculine about sitting around a table talking, right? I mean, that's a human thing. We all do that.
Like, as I said, you're playing Let's Pretend with dice,
Yeah.
you know?
So
When it gets right down to it, when you really get down to the core of it, you know? So,
So would you be good with taking a little break, maybe changing our setting to being a little bit more informal?
Absolutely.
Answering a few more questions,
Yeah.
maybe playing a game?
yeah.
All right, well,
Yeah, thank you guys.